The first section of tonight's training is called Getting Started. And here we want to just really touch a little bit on what do we mean when we talk about transition and some of the things that you might want to be thinking about very generally as we go along. So when we use the word transition, we're talking about primarily transition from high school to life after high school, whatever that may look like. And it is the move from oftentimes being children or young adults to moving into adulthood. A lot of families may have experience thinking about and talking about transition in the context of schools, and that is can be a very prescribed process and discussion. But here we're talking about it not just in terms of the sort of bureaucratic processes that you might be participating in, but also in the ways that families just think about the future. So we think about it in terms of, what happens for our kids related to education, but we also think about it as what does it look like when kids are living with us and no longer in school, or when our kids might be living in the community on their own or in their own apartment. What does transition in healthcare look like? What do I have to know about? And what are all the other benefits that might be important to be thinking about? This is also what families do with all of our kids, not just kids with disabilities. So all of our families go through transitions for all of our kids. They leave home, they go to college, they get jobs, they do all kinds of different things. So in a sense, how we think about supporting our kids who don't have disabilities is no different than how we think about supporting our kids who also have disabilities. So we're going to think a lot tonight about what kinds of things do we need to be thinking about. So one of the first steps is to begin to put together a vision for the future. And this is something that is ideally happening from when kids are really young. And we start talking about, look what Uncle Ed does. This is the kind of work he does. This is the kind of work your father has done, your grandfather has done. This is part of our family history. So dreaming and imagining the future is about beginning to find those touchstones in our kids' lives and in our lives that create that discussion about dreaming and imagining. As kids begin to approach transition, we talk more specifically about what does the future look like. We ask kids, what do they like to do? What do they envision themselves doing? We might look to role models within our families or within our communities. So for example, how many young boys talked about wanting to be firemen or policemen or some sort of helping profession that they see in their community and have been interested in? Another question to ask are there experiences and opportunities available to young adults to help them start to shape their interests? For example, are there things happening in the school? Are there school clubs or extracurricular activities that young adults might be involved in that might help us understand what their interests are and help them explore their interests? Something else for family members for families to be thinking about is what is our tolerance for risk. So, for example, are our kids able to do things without us? Sometimes they have those opportunities during the school day, but what about outside of school? How can we create opportunities for our young adults that aren't always with us as parents? And while I can ask that question, I know it was virtually impossible for me to do with my son because we didn't have the people supports so that we could step away and my son could have those opportunities without us. So while it's an important question to ask, it's not always easy to answer. And then there's also sort of specific techniques to use to do what's called futures planning. And some of those are included in your additional resources and materials. But sometimes we have an opportunity to engage in a futures planning process. It might be available through, for example, a service coordinator associated with the Children's Long-Term Support System. It could be something that is available through someone else in the community that you might be able to access. There's a network of folks who've been trained on person-centered planning throughout the state. And you'll also be hearing more about that from Cindy in 2 weeks. So all of these are tools and ways to begin to think about and questions to ask as we look to the future and what that might look like. It's never too late to start getting an idea of what somebody's interested in, but certainly the earlier the better. I don't know if we have families here who have young children, but certainly all of these are things that you can be trying at any time. Something else to be thinking about as we talk about and think about transition is how to help build self-advocacy skills for young adults. So by self-advocacy skills, we mean those skills that young adults have that can help them begin to articulate what they need, advocate for themselves, and work with others to make their needs known, and to speak on their own behalf as well as having families do that with and for them. So for example, are young adults participating in their IEP meetings? And if not, it's a great time to start having that opportunity. Are there teachable moments? For example, if a young adult needs to set up an appointment with a doctor, might we be able to role play that ahead of time, and then they could try to do that, or order a prescription for a medication? So are there teachable moments that we can use to help acquire some of those self-advocacy skills? And then always be thinking about and looking at what are those extracurricular activities where young adults can be learning and trying out these things, and what are the community activities available where they can be doing this. On the slide in front of you are additional resources for this topic.